leave these to my son. He loved history also, and I lost him a year ago.
A century-old family photo, a child's hollow stare, a Union uniform that shouldn't exist. What was supposed to be a Civil War keepsake turned into a chilling discovery that rewrote a hidden chapter of American history. Why did no one notice this photo before? Who were the people in the frame, and what were they hiding? And why does this single image hint at deception, manipulation, and survival? This isn't just a forgotten relic. It's a staged illusion with deadly implications. We'll reveal the incredible journey of one research team, the forensic clues that cracked it open, and the legacy of a mother who defied everything to protect her son. What they uncovered will leave you stunned. A photo that shouldn't exist. It began with an envelope, no return address, just a scribbled note inside. Found this in my grandfather's attic. Might be worth something. Belonged to someone named Harrove. The contents? A Civil War-era glass plate negative, fragile and flawless, resting inside protective tissue paper as if it had just been developed yesterday. Dr. Fiona Ree, a forensic archivist known for exposing military document fraud, received it by mail 2 weeks before the discovery broke headlines. Fiona had handled hundreds of 19th century photographs, battlefield stills, officer portraits, grieving widows standing in black beside headstones. But this one stopped her cold. It was wrong. At first glance, the image appeared ordinary. A Union soldier seated stiffly in full uniform, a woman beside him in a neatly pressed plaid dress, and a boy of about 4 perched on the soldier's lap. It was clearly posed, likely captured by a civilian photographer during wartime. But despite the familial setup, it didn't feel like a family. The soldier's expression was unreadable, his gaze harsh, posture rigid, beyond normal discipline. The woman sat primly, arms folded, with no warmth in her face, more statue than spouse. The boy, unnaturally still, stared dead into the lens. Most jarring of all, none of them were touching. No hand on a shoulder, no gentle gesture of comfort. They weren't connected, they were assembled. Fiona squinted through her loupe at the stitching on the man's uniform. Cavalry insignia, perfectly aligned, buttons clean. It looked authentic, but when she searched military records for the name listed on the note, Samuel T. Harrove, there was nothing. No enlistment, no pension records, no casualties, no one. It was as if this soldier had never existed. Appalled at the peculiar situation, Fiona called her team together. Digital archivist Nolan Tran, knowledgeable in AI facial recognition and spectral enhancement. Historian Clara Voss, who was an expert in Civil War-era social customs and regions record-keeping. Anne, who formed a genealogical researcher who had traced Union bloodlines for more than 30 years. They had solved forgery cases that would have fooled institutions, but something felt different this time. They set about things in the normal way. Nolan prepared the glass plate for scanning, isolating layers for digging out hidden details. Clara now started grabbing census records, local newspaper articles, and land registries for the Harrove name. Ed lauded his jewel of military registries. He immersed himself in cavalry rosters from Virginia to Pennsylvania. He whispered to himself as he placed the glass into the scanner. If this is just a family photo, why does it feel like a staged confession? The preliminary scans were normal and would have looked so to any untrained eye except Fiona's. She felt something tense in it, though. In family portraits of the Civil War, there was a way of intimacy. An arm thrown around a parent, or a hand clutching a jacket lapel. But this space seemed more like a wall than anything else. And the little boy was not looking either bored or baffled. He seemed to be concentrating, as if he had been told to hold still. Hours into the research, Ed finally declared what Fiona had dreaded. There is no cavalryman by that name. Not in 1862 or in 1864. Not in any regiment from Virginia or from anywhere else. But Clara had something else to add. She said, but that name did show up in a deed of record of land near Roanoke, just once. In 1862, bought a 17-acre plot itself, then vanished. One photo, 3 persons, one name that did not seem to belong to either of them. Indeed, the queries were increasing the deeper they dug. Where was the military record for this man? Why did the child seem constricted, not comforted? And who did it get sent to, if it has managed to stay undercover for more than 150 years? What they would uncover next would not only change how they saw the photo, it would shake everything they thought they knew about Civil War history. Because the real story wasn't frozen in time, it had been buried inside the frame. Hidden details in the frame. By day 3, the photo that once seemed like a minor anomaly had become a full-blown historical enigma. Dr. Fiona Rees' team had now scanned the Civil War-era glass plate in over 20 spectral frequencies. What appeared under ultraviolet and infrared imaging turned a seemingly innocent family portrait into something far more unsettling. Nolan Tran, the team's AI scanning specialist, was first to spot the irregularity. Using contrast enhancement and layer isolation, he noticed a subtle pattern just beneath the boy's right wrist. It wasn't obvious at first, just a slight distortion in the folds of the child's sleeve. But after further refinement, the truth came into focus. A thin, taut thread looped across the fabric. "It's binding," Nolan muttered. "That boy's hands are tied together, hidden under his sleeve." Fiona leaned in, heart quickening. He's not just sitting still, he's being forced to stay still. It wasn't the only clue. On the woman's wrist, just beneath the crook of her folded arms, Nolan spotted the faint outline of another object, previously erased or cropped. The area had a different light absorption pattern, indicating something had once rested there. A journal, a document, a weapon? They didn't know. But it was gone now, meticulously removed before the final image was printed. Even the soldier's uniform, which had first seemed regulation accurate, began to show cracks under scrutiny. Clara Voss pointed out subtle stitching inconsistencies, barely visible deviations from what would have been standard issue. The insignia, likely authentic, but repurposed. The coat might have belonged to someone else, someone dead, someone looted. Then Nolan found the seam. On the left side of the man's coat, nearly buried behind the boy's head, was a split in the stitching. Tucked into the tear, barely perceptible until magnified, was the folded edge of a small piece of parchment. The team enhanced the section, frame by frame, and digitally reconstructed what they could. The design was unmistakable. It was a Union-issued topographical scout map, military grade, restricted access. Clara gasped. Why would he have that in a family photo? There was strategic significance attached to the map. It indicates modification of supply routes in Virginia. A person would have to possess a high clearance to possess the sort of map shown in the image. But Samuel T. Harrove didn't feature in any registry. Not as a scout, not as cavalry, not at all. The photo was unraveling into something darker than deception. This wasn't a family posing for a memory. It was a man fabricating an identity, using a woman and child to sell a story. And worse, every pixel of the image seemed choreographed to serve that purpose. The final clue, however, wasn't to be found within the image, but in the frame. The original wooden frame was packed separately, probably as an afterthought in the packaging. Fiona opened it with a pair of tweezers, more out of habit rather than real hope. When she noticed the paperboard backing was brittle, aging, but still intact, she peeled it back gently, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a steam-sealed, yellowed envelope that seemed fragile. Lydia had written the man's true name, Daniel Reed. She knew. At least some part of her had known the truth. The photograph was now beyond a mere curiosity. It was potential evidence of grievous betrayal during wartime. But worse, it might have captured a child hostage and threatened a woman. And now that they had a name, Daniel Reed, their search would spiral into darker territory. Because Daniel Reed wasn't a soldier. He was a man executed for espionage. Or was he? The boy's silent message. While the adults in the photograph told one kind of story, rigid posture, official uniforms, and a staged sense of domesticity, it was the child who betrayed the truth, not with words, not even with movement, but in the eerie silence of his body, in the unnatural stillness captured on that glass plate. The boy seemed to be communicating something that no one had noticed for over a century. His name, as they would later learn, was Elias Harrow, born in 1859. He appeared to be about 4 or 5 in the photo, perched stiffly on the man's lap, hands pressed together like a statue. At first glance, it was easy to assume this was just old-fashioned photographic formality. People held still for long exposures in the 1860s. But Clara Voss, always the one to see what others missed, noticed something that changed the tone of the entire investigation. "The angle of his shoulders is wrong," she said, her finger tracing the curve on Nolan's digital reconstruction. "He's not leaning into the man, he's resisting him." Under high-resolution enhancement, the boy's sleeves revealed slight tension in the fabric around his wrists. What initially looked like creases were, under infrared mapping, revealed to be unnatural bunching consistent with restraints, not ropes. Something thinner, twine, perhaps, or a child's sash used inappropriately. His posture wasn't solemn, it was controlled. And then came the whisper from history itself. In a dusty corner of an online archive, Clara found a handwritten note from an orphanage in Staunton, Virginia, dated 1865. It listed Elias Harrow as an unaccompanied minor. The form included a chilling addendum: "Child brought after dusk by unidentified woman, refused to speak. When questioned, said only once, 'He told me not to move.'" That single line echoed through the lab like a bullet fired across time. That wasn't just obedience, that was fear. That was programmed stillness. The boy's silence in the photograph had more to do with conditioning than the exposure, possibly from abuse, possibly from threats. Elias looked straight ahead but shunned the gaze of the viewer. It was blank. It was hollow. The expression bore neither curiosity nor warmth one would expect in a family portrait. Instead, it read like a glass-encased warning, and yet that silence had something kept by Elias, a message that experts would decode only after 150 years. Nolan intensified the edge of the child's lapel just above the binding on his wrist. There, barely visible in the folds, was a dark smudge. Initially dismissed as dirt or plate damage, it was soon revealed to be graphite, a crudely drawn line, a child's scribble, perhaps. But it was not random. Under stylized rendering, it formed a broken loop, a shape similar to the cipher marks Union Scouts used when mapping locations on civilian surfaces, a cry for help in code. Elias might conceivably, though unproven, have placed this shadow there himself during some previous sitting, imprinting it then onto the ultimate plate. By design or by accident, this was the one trace of resistance against an image that seemed bent on suppressing it. Clara was the first to voice it. This photograph was intended to prove that he was someone with a family, that he was harmless. But the boy's silence cries loud. Somehow, he knew that maybe one day, someone would see him. What had once appeared to be a posed child now seemed to be a human distress call, a signal buried under 19th century optics, waiting for its decipherment. Elias never grew up to talk about the photograph. He died in the 1920s, not knowing that it had become a national artifact. But he existed. And because of his stillness, it was one whispered line at the orphanage. The truth did not completely disappear. The next breakthrough wouldn't come from the image alone, but from the letter folded inside its frame. Words never meant to be seen, written by a woman trapped in someone else's story. A letter with no salutation, no destination, just fear, doubt, and a warning. So what did it actually say? What truth had been hidden for over a century? The confession in the frame. Until this point, the photo had been unsettling, cryptic, strange, and full of unanswered questions. But it was still a matter of interpretation, expert analysis, technological enhancement, circumstantial connections. That changed the moment Fiona Ree discovered the envelope hidden in the photo's frame. What had been an eerie mystery suddenly became a documented confession, hidden for over 150 years. The frame had been stored separately from the glass plate, a common practice for preserving Civil War-era negatives. No one thought to examine it closely until Clara noticed the faint ridge under the backing paper. Fiona, using tweezers and gloved hands, peeled back the aging material. Beneath it lay an old, folded sheet of stationery, its fibers yellowed but intact. The ink faded but still legible. At the bottom, in a deliberate cursive hand, was a signature, Lydia Hargrove, the name on the glass plate, the woman in the photo. The letter itself was short, but it changed everything. Dated April 1864, it read more like a personal journal entry than a message to anyone. No salutation, no address, just a woman's voice trying to make sense of the darkness closing in around her. They told me not to let anyone see it, but Samuel insisted, said it would prove his loyalty. But it wasn't loyalty. He looked too long, too hard. The man in the lens wasn't Daniel Reed. Not anymore. And I fear he sees through the boy. The room fell silent when Fiona finished reading it aloud. Clara looked as if the breath had been knocked from her lungs. Nolan sat back, his eyes fixed on the scanned image of the man's face. And Ed, the Civil War genealogist, simply muttered, She knew who he really was. This wasn't a happy family. This wasn't even a family at all. Revelation came in the form of Lydia's words, confirming what they had only speculated, that Samuel T. Hargrove is an alias, a mask for Daniel Reed, the accused Union defector who is supposedly executed for espionage in 1863. Except there is no proof that he died, no burial, no witness accounts. And there's the reason they know for that. He had faked a living, and Lydia was forced to live within it. But there was more. The ongoing archival dive revealed a troubling pattern for the years relating to local records. Property deeds connected with the Harrove name all ended abruptly. A singular newspaper clipping from 1865 mentioned a widow Harrow disappearing from her home west of Roanoke, leaving a child behind. That surname, spelled differently, matches Lydia's possible maiden name. The man was never named in the article, only mentioned him as a known traitor. Then Ed found the tribunal's notes about Daniel Reed's final military interrogation. Scribbled at the margins of one stenographer's transcript was a cryptic remark. Subject referenced family, wife, child, none present. The statement appeared rehearsed. That was it. The photograph had been part of his strategy, his attempt to humanize himself in the eyes of Union officers, a forger's proof of innocence. And Lydia? She'd been caught in it, possibly manipulated, maybe even threatened. Her letter didn't say outright, but her fear was palpable. She had started to see him for what he was. Not a soldier, not a husband, a man hiding behind a uniform, using her child as a prop in his theater of deception. Nolan scanned the envelope itself. Inside the paper's inner fold was a faint marking, H23D4, the same code etched on the plate's edge. It matched the tag of a Richmond photographer later arrested for falsifying military documents and helping Confederate deserters forge new identities. The photograph wasn't an heirloom, it was a lie. But the letter turned it into evidence, the kind that rewrites official records. Now the team faced a bigger question. If Daniel Reed was never executed, what happened next? How long did he hide? And just how far did he go to protect the fiction he'd constructed? Whatever came next wouldn't be found in documents alone. The answer, unbelievably, was hiding in the photo itself, folded into the seams of his coat. The forger's signature and the spy's cover. The deeper Fiona's team went, the clearer it became. The photograph wasn't just a mystery. It was a planted artifact, crafted with precision and intended for deception. But there was still one piece missing. Why this photo existed in the first place. Why would someone risk staging a portrait with a woman and child under false names during one of the most volatile periods of the Civil War? The answer would come not from the faces in the frame, but from the fabric, stitching, and what was tucked inside the uniform itself. While analyzing the image's high-resolution scans under ultraviolet light and contrast layering, Nolan spotted something strange. A crease behind the boy's head, where the soldier's jacket seemed unnaturally raised. Zooming in, he isolated a folded corner of paper, barely peeking from inside the coat's inner seam. Clara stabilized the image frame, enhancing the contrast while reducing background noise. When the shape became clear, they gasped. It was a Union-issued topographical map, the kind only accessible to high-level military scouts and commanders. The scan revealed visible alterations to troop routes that had been rerouted or sabotaged in the months leading up to the war's final Virginia offensives. Why would a man posing for a family portrait be hiding a military map inside his uniform? Because it wasn't a family portrait. It was a cover story, a backup plan. If Daniel Reed were caught again trying to infiltrate Union ranks, the photo could serve two purposes. One, make him appear loyal, a devoted family man with roots, responsibilities, and nothing to gain from betrayal. Two, provide leverage, proof that he had personal ties and that harming him might endanger a child. But Fiona had a suspicion. She asked Nolan to scan the physical glass plate again, this time focusing on the outer edges. That's when they found it. A tiny, barely legible etching along the glass's lower left. The initials H23D4, the same code found in the folded envelope behind the frame. It was a tracking number, a signature. When Nolan ran the code through Smithsonian's forgery registry, everything unraveled. Isaac Verlin was not a chronicler of war. The man was not an enlisted documentarian. He was a civilian portraitist from Richmond who produced staged military images. Isaac Verlin, charged in 1865 with false enlistment documents and altered portraits, as well as with making aid to deserters, Verlin had been in the company of known sympathizers of the Confederacy and operated under the guise of civilian photography services. His clientele? Men like Daniel Reed, traitors, spies, and those attempting to reinvent their identities with help from forged visuals. The portrait was custom-built propaganda, not purely symbolic. The father-mother-child family dynamic was intentionally constructed to evoke an emotional response strong enough to compel the man to go to war. Lydia has her gaze directed toward the lens. The boy is rigidly postured, while the soldier's hands show subtle tension, all underlining sympathy. The picture was one to work upon, not the public, but military personnel assigned to the task of rooting out traitors from among the men. This Reed tried to weaponize against feeling emotion. The ultimate betrayal was not only political, but personal. Lydia had been drawn into this charade, perhaps initially with openness, with something less than that. But she clearly saw through the illusion. The information in that letter made it plain. She expressed fears for the child, noted Daniel's character flaws, sensed how much pain the whole lie was costing them, and knew that it was costing them more than identity. It was costing them their freedom. What Fiona summarized, in essence, was that Daniel Reed had escaped death through an assumed name. A forger had made him a visual alibi, and he attempted to enter Union lines under false documents with a child to whom he would give a father's name. The map inside his uniform would have been for Confederate eyes, strategic intel, hidden beneath a guise of fatherhood. He failed. In 1863, he was stopped trying to infiltrate again, photo and all. Tribunal records state he was apprehended, interrogated, and then vanished from custody. Trial? No. Conviction? No. Grave? Nothing but another glorious stain on honor and a cast-off photo. Lydia? Not so lucky. She ran away. She left Elias at an orphanage for his protection because, to her, nothing was safe while Daniel Reed was alive. Yet for all its lies, the photo became a vessel of truth. A war criminal's final gamble. A woman's quiet rebellion. And a child's survival, etched in the silver grains of a glass plate that was never meant to be found. Lydia's escape and Elias's survival. As the photograph's secrets unraveled, one question consumed the team. What happened to Lydia and the boy? For Fiona, Clara, Nolan, and Ed, this wasn't just history. It was personal. A search for justice. Ed Hargreaves uncovered the next clue in parish records from Staunton, Virginia, a ledger from St. Agnes Girls Academy dated 1870, listing Lydia Harrow as a teacher. Beside her name, A handwritten note read, "Guardian of Elias H." It was her first trace since a 1865 newspaper clipping reported a widow Harrow missing with a child. By using her maiden name, Lydia had shed the Hargrove identity, Daniel Reed's lie, and was reclaiming her life. The note confirmed what the team hoped. She had survived, and so had Elias. She hadn't abandoned him, she had protected him. Temporarily leaving him in an orphanage was part of her escape. But how had she gotten away from Reed? Fiona believed the answer lay in Elias's orphanage intake notes. A matron recalled a boy of about 6 being left at the gate one night by a woman in a dark cloak. He didn't respond to the name Hargrove. When asked about his parents, he repeated just one phrase. "He told me not to move." More than a memory, it was a command, a trace of trauma. Lydia had likely set things up with great care for their separation, knowing that Reed would most probably chase them. Leaving Elias anonymous also gave them both a chance to slip away and to survive. Then Nolan stumbled on one last find. In a dusty box at the Virginia State Archives was a lesson plan book dated 1874 and authored by Lydia Harrow. In the margin of one page was the inscription, "He cannot find me here. I teach, I live, and he will never touch my son again." Pressed among those words was a dried flower, a message of defiance and quiet strength. In the records from the late 1880s, Elias appears again as Elias Harrow. He worked as a farm laborer and after marrying in 1888, led a full life, raising 3 children. Fleets of descendants fought in both world wars, none knowing the truth until now. At the unveiling of the photo, James Harrow, Elias's great-grandson, stood in silence, placing beneath the photo frame a small folded piece of red plaid, a remnant of Lydia's dress handed down through generations, a tribute to the woman who resolutely refused to be erased, and to a boy who had learned to withstand the silence until liberty. Lydia didn't leave behind diaries, manifestos, or public records. She left behind a photo, a faint map, a lesson book, and a child who lived. And through those fragments, her legacy spoke louder than any trial or history book ever could. The lie that saved them. By the time Dr. Fiona Ree and her team concluded their investigation, the truth had outgrown the photograph entirely. What began as a curious Civil War-era family portrait proved to be a calculated forgery. Yet beneath the deception was something profoundly real: survival. The final breakthrough came from a misfiled report in a military folder labeled Field Discipline, 1863-64. It described a man captured while trying to infiltrate a Union dispatch post using the alias Samuel Hargrove. Among his belongings, a forged military map and a glass plate photo wrapped in linen. He claimed the photo proved his loyalty and family ties. That man was Daniel Reed. The name, map, and image unraveled under scrutiny. Reed vanished before trial, likely under a new identity. The photograph, forgotten for decades, resurfaced in a private collection, waiting to be understood. At that moment, Fiona was presenting her findings at the National Military Archives, and the glass plate had ceased to be an antique and had transformed itself into evidence. Its plaque now states, Plate H23D4, posing as Daniel Reed, Civil War traitor, in Union uniform with Lydia Harrow, believed hostage, and Elias Harrow, minor child, likely staged to counteract false identity, a forgery to be preserved for the historical record. On the other hand, what struck a chord with airgoers lay not in the fraud itself, but the expression of the picture: Lydia's terror, Elias's acquiescence. A woman coerced into compliance. A child is made to comply. What the false photo had captured was a moment of subtle defiance tinged with sheer endurance. Among the people on the guest list was James Harrow, great-grandson of Elias. He discovered the project as part of his inquiry into his family tree. The photograph stunned him, not for any deceit. She couldn't save herself in public, he said about Lydia, so she found a way to save him in private. Then a quiet act. James placed a strip of red plaid beneath the frame, a remnant of Lydia's dress, the same pattern she had worn in the picture. her last mark left behind. As the room was silent, Fiona stepped back. This moment did not require any narration to make it real. The photo was meant to lie in order to reveal something true. That survival does not always shout. Sometimes it hides in silence, restraint, and sacrifice. The legacy of Lydia and Elias now lay in the records, in the quiet folds of red cloth and the ghosted eyes of a woman who endured. Initially presenting itself as a fairly ordinary archival investigation, it gradually gave way to a greater and more far-reaching concern: historical considerations, questions of identity, and human courage. The glass plate photograph, in its intention forged as an object of deception and a most ingenious diversion, has therefore paradoxically turned out to become an avenue to valor on the quiet side. They gave voice to a woman history tried to erase, and a child who had already been silenced. Resistance lay with Lydia. In Elias lay survival. And in the relics that remain, forged image, a hidden letter, a dried flower, a scrap of red plaid, was the story of what happened that longed to be reclaimed. History is not just the story of battles, it's the secrets hidden between them. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. What would you have done in Lydia's place? Make sure to like, subscribe, and click on the next video for more history that refused to stay buried.